Why would you take a drug that shares several side effects with the symptoms of the illness that you're trying to avoid? In this episode, I'm talking about one of the most hotly contested topics you're likely to have in the mountains, which is, should I be taking acetazolamide, or its trading name Diamox, to prevent altitude sickness? This is a complex topic with its fair share of misinformation, so in this video I'll be going through both the pros and cons of taking Diamox. I'll be going through some of the side effects that you're likely to experience if you take it, as well as the evidence-based guidelines for dosage as outlined by the Wilderness Medical Society. I'm far from being a medical professional, and none of this should be considered medical advice. Alright, let's get into it. The issue of AMS at its core simply comes down to a lack of oxygen in the body. And the way that we combat that problem is simply by breathing more. And this is where acetazolamide, or Diamox, can become very useful. So, how does Diamox work? Well, when we take Diamox, it forces the kidneys to release bicarbonate, and that starts quite a complex chain reaction in the body, which ends up making two very important changes and some other side effects that you probably don't want. But those two important changes are an increase in respiration rate, so how many times you breathe per minute, and also the increase in the depth of each breath you take. So it means we're getting more oxygen per breath and we're taking more breaths per minute, and those two things are very, very useful at altitude. Now, personally, I like to take 10 or 15 extra breaths whenever I can. So if I stop to take a drink, or if I think about it while I'm hiking or climbing, I like to breathe in through my nose, out through my mouth 10 or 15 times, and just give the Diamox a helping hand by boosting the depth and the amount of breaths a little more. Okay, so on paper, so far, Diamox sounds like a good idea. It's increasing our respiration rate, it's increasing the depth, which means we're getting more oxygen, and it's giving us a much better chance of acclimatizing. However, we haven't gotten into the side effects yet.
Side effects.
And this is really where this becomes a contentious issue. So I'm going to bring up a table here of the symptoms of altitude sickness on the left, and on the right will be the side effects of Diamox. The side effects of Diamox and the symptoms of altitude sickness have a lot in common, and there's a couple of views on this. One view is that it's better not to take Diamox so that you have a clear and simple line of communication between your mind and your body about exactly what you're feeling and why. For example, let's say you're out at altitude and you've chosen not to take Diamox and you're starting to experience a headache, nausea and vomiting. If that's the case, then you can pretty clearly say that you are experiencing AMS symptoms and that you should be descending in order to feel better. On the other hand, if you have taken Diamox and you're starting to experience those symptoms like headache, nausea and vomiting, then it's very difficult to be certain whether you're experiencing the side effects of Diamox or whether you're actually experiencing symptoms of altitude sickness. And it's always safer to assume it's the latter. And so the problem isn't whether Diamox is useful. It certainly is, and there's many studies that suggest that. The problem is this ambiguity. It's the grey area, and it's the reason why many people in the industry strongly recommend against taking acetazolamide or Diamox. And I understand that 100%. Why would you take a drug that shares several side effects with the symptoms of the illness that you're trying to avoid? Well, the true answer to that question can only come from you, and it can only come after many times of experience and being in the mountains and knowing your body. Everyone's a little bit sick. It's always the deal. But the lack of experience and knowledge is where the real danger lies. And if somebody was to have serious signs of altitude sickness and they continued to ascend under the assumption that what they were experiencing was simply the side effects of Diamox, then that person would really be risking a lot. Now, if you do choose to take Diamox, and this is a massive pro tip, you must be aware of one of the main side effects, which is polyuria, which essentially means you just pee a lot. So this generally happens on your first 24 hours of when you start dosing So what I suggest is that when you do start dosing, you have an ensuite room, or at least you have a toilet nearby, because you will be peeing a lot getting up in the middle of the night. My personal record is 17 times in one night, so yeah, just be aware of that. So you need to look at your acclimatization profile and make up your own mind about whether you're going to take Diamox, but in general, and obviously speak to your doctor about this, especially if you have sulfur allergies or if you're pregnant. Outside of that, my general recommendation is that you take Diamox, especially if you're a first timer. After that, you've got your altitude scout badge, you can do whatever you want, but for first timers, I definitely recommend that you take Diamox. But before you take this drug, you need to make an agreement with yourself that if you're experiencing the symptoms, whether they're real or not real, then you have to be okay with staying put while the rest of your group goes ahead, or even descending. And as long as you're okay to make that decision, then Diamox is safe to take. All right, now how much to take and when to take it. Let's get into the official recommendations from the Wilderness Medical Society. So we have two different recommendations. Number one is for prevention. So 125 milligrams twice a day, and in most cases that is a half a tablet at breakfast and half a tablet at the evening meal. Number two is treatment. Treatment dosage is 250 milligrams twice a day, and in most cases that's a whole tablet at breakfast and again at the evening meal. Now, if you want to know more about this topic, check out the other videos on my channel that I have about altitude. And by the way, if you're not sure of the symptoms, I've got a whole different video about that. It's worth checking out. I'll see you on the summit.